Good morning, my small chevra that makes it still worth to prepare and come here. So thank Rabbi uh, Rabbi Smith. My mind is still for giving me the opportunity to make a fool out of myself. I don't know, to give the share. It's very hard when you're sick. Let me tell you something, because between trying to take some cold medicine so you don't have so many symptoms in front of everybody, which clouds your senses, and between not getting hardly getting any sleep last night because I was coughing, it's like I don't know if I'm prepared, not prepared,
No,
if
you
you're
are.
gonna understand.
You are.
Well, let's do the best we can together. Okay. Gufa, so here we are, Gufa, middle of Ches Amad. Oh, and we learn for the schus of all the neshamas need schus and for health for the people in the before shlemas and
Amen.
for anybody else that needs to be saved and
Right.
anywhere that we can
In the
help.
basement.
Amen.
Yes. And
Right.
bring the base of Mikdash now. Yes, he'll help.
Amen.
Yes. Bring it yesterday already, all right?
Yes.
Gufa, the text itself stated, Amar Rabbi Eliezer said, Mincha shekamatza behechal keshera. A mincha where the kamitza, this Hawaiian kind of move, taking with three fingers the flower, when if it was separated in the sanctuary, the heichal, remember the heichal is that area that at one end contains the Kodesh Kodashim, and at the front part has the Mincha Ketores and the Shulchan with the 12 showbreads and uh, the menorah. And we learned elsewhere, by the way, just if you want to be reminded that when we daven Shemon Esrei, at least in this part of the world, and we face east to face the Heichal, the Beis Hamikdash, that if you want to pray for a little bit more wisdom, you tilt a little bit to the right, because that way you'll be pointing more towards the menorah, which was the light, the wisdom that was coming from there. And if you want more money, then you tilt a little bit more to the left from the east, and you'll be pointing towards the lechem apanim, the showbreads, and bread is money. Show me the money, and the nickname for money is bread. Okay, anyway, getting back to the mincha here at hand, mincha is supposed to be separated in the courtyard, the Azara, all right, where the big Mizbeach is, where the Kodesh Kodashim are done on the north side, and the Kodesh Kolim are done either north or the south side of Chicago. Do we have any tissues around this? Thank you. Just one moment. Okay. So he says in the mincha shekamatza behechal kshera, that the mincha, which was supposed to have been done in the Azara, if it's done in the sanctuary in the Hechal, it's still valid. Because we find this in regard to removal of the spoons of the Levana from the table in the sanctuary. What are they referring to there? Remember, I just said that in the Hechal, there is the showbread table. That's where 12 breads are. All right? And the methodology and what happened weekly there is that 8 Kohanim would march in. Two of them would be holding like a balancing act, 6 showbreads each. And 2 Kohanim each one would hold one kind of cone-shaped sanctified vessel that has the frankincense in it, the levana, also called the bazichin. Uh, and what would happen is the two of them, okay, that's like the new supply. And 4 people are carrying nothing. So the 4 people carrying nothing, 2 of the Kohanim would grab 6 and 6 of the chalas, the showbreads, and the other two guys would grab firstly the two vazichen, and then the new supply can be put on. Now, there's a problem there because we'll get into that. Number one, the vazichen have to be taken off first. Number two, the vazichen can only be taken off after a certain time, after the 6th hour. All right. Number three, you can't the showbreads have to be whole. Remember, the Kohanim can eat these showbreads on Shabbos, all right? And they can only eat this if this process was done right. So if the process wasn't done right and the showbreads weren't whole at the time the vazichin were removed, then they're out. They're out their lunch, and many lunches. So we go into this in a little bit more detail. So Maseches Rav Yirmiyah, the Gemara raises a question to this ruling from a brisa. Again, the brisa is that lone Mishnah that's not connected to a Gemara. And it brings a verse. It says about one who brings a mincha to the temple. And in this case, let's see what the verse is. Hold on a second. It's brought from Vayikra. And of course, my Gemara won't hyperlink because I've used up all. You have the pasuk there, the sentence, the comments misham. Okay, well, the terms in there, it's the comments misham, that when this person brings his mincha, right, it says he does the kamitza. Remember this thing, all right? What happened? We lost. Says, there he is. I like to look at it. Okay. Hi, Naftali. All right. If you're not there, I'm not sure I'm talking to anybody.
I'm here.
Yeah, Chaim and Moshe are on, but they don't have any pictures at the moment. Well, maybe Moshe's adding a millionth child to his picture there, but I don't know. Usually I see his family picture. What?
You need pictures.
Moshe always has a picture of his from some family wedding or gathering.
All right,
So
but we're
he's-
focusing on the Gemara. Let's go.
I know, but you never have a picture, so I don't even know that you're there, except I see your name. Oh, Moshe put his picture back. Yes, correct. Now
There we
everyone's
go.
there. Thank you. Okay, so it says for comments misham that the Kohen takes the comments from there. Now, what does there mean? Sometimes I'm in my house and I hear a voice from someone in my family. I say, "Where are you?" And they say to me, "I'm here." I say, "Here where?" I don't know if they're on the side in the living room. I don't know if they're upstairs. Everything is connected. I just hear someone say here. So when the Kohen says you take the comments from there, all right, where is he taking it from? Is he taking it from the place? They're going to be where it was supposed to be taking it from, or are we talking about the bowl of flour, where this is the case where, let's say, the Kohen used his left hand instead of the right hand to do the kamitza. It's got to be a right-handed job. So if he did the left hand, he's got to go back and do it with the right hand. So when it says kametz misham, does it mean that he goes back to the location, which was really part of the Azara where Ezra's Yisrael would stand, all right? Or does it talking about just going back into the bowl again and doing it the right way? So he shall bring it to the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, and the Kohen shall take the comments from there. The term from there refers to the place where the owner is standing. That's viewpoint one. The verse thus teaches that the comments is taken mimakam sheraglei hazar omedes, from the place where a non-Kohen may stand. This is the first opinion. When it says the Kohen takes it misham, he takes it from where, meaning not from in the Heichal, but he's supposed to take it from the Azara. This price apparently means that the Kamitza is valid only in the courtyard, that's the English word for Azara, and not in the sanctuary, that's the English word for the Heichal. Before resolving the problem, the Gemara quotes the continuation of the Brisa. Ben Beseira Omer, Ben Beseira says that a different lesson is derived from the verse. Minayim she'im kamatz bismo, I just mentioned this. From where is it known that if one performed the kamitza with his left hand, in other words, mistakenly did it with his left hand, the Kohen, shiachsia v'yitmatz v'yamin, that he goes back, he puts the komets back into the vessel and performs the kamitza again with his right hand. Talmud Lomar v'kametz misham. So he brings proof from the same two words, kametz misham. So you see, the question is, what does misham mean? I jumped the gun in the explanation. Does misham from there mean from the location or from the bowl that contains the not the dough, the dough. It's the flour and the oil already done in most cases. The Gemara now defends Rav Elazar's ruling against the objection raised by Rav Yirmiyah. Iked Amrei, who Mosiv La, the Humafarikla. There are those who say that he, Rav Yirmiyah, posed a challenge and he resolved it himself. Iked Amrei Amalei Rav Yaakov Rav Yirmiyah. And there are those who say that Rav Yaakov said to Rav Yirmiyah, Tachlifa, the son of Tachlifa, excuse me, Asper Allah. I'll explain this to you. Let me explain. It's like Ricky Ricardo would say to Lucy. Let me explain. No litzracha ela lahachshia esko azara kula. It, in the Brisa, this was only needed to render the entire courtyard fit for a Kmitza. Such a derivation is necessary. Shlo tomar, so you will not say as follows: Hoel va'ola kodshe kedoshim. Since an ola is kodshe kedoshim, or mincha kodshe kedoshim, and a mincha is also kodshe kedoshim, the following analogy can be drawn between them. Ma ola tu natzafan, just as the ola needs to be slaughtered in the northern area of the courtyard. Remember, there's certain sacrifices like chotas, ola, and a few others, because they are considered kodshe kedoshim, holy of holy sacrifices. They can only be done on the north, slaughtered on the northern part of the Azara of the main Mizbeach. So they're not on the side where the ramp is, but they're on the other side. Af mincha tu natzafan. So to a mincha needs to have its kamitza done in the northern area of the courtyard, according to this answer. The Torah therefore states from there to teach that the kamitza may be formed anywhere in the courtyard, even in the southern section. According to this interpretation, the purpose of the verse is to include the southern section of the courtyard, and thus it is not available to exclude the sanctuary. Okay, so remember, we've got three areas here. We've got the sanctuary part, which is the Kosh Kadashim, and the what's the place in there? The place where the show what? Heichel, thank you. Where the showbreads and the Ketoras Mizbeach and the menorah is. All right. So according to this answer, we're saying that the Kmitza can be done also, even though it should be done on the northern side of the Mizbeach in the Azara, it can be done on the southern side, Misham, meaning from the Azara side, and not referring to anywhere else, or about, according to that. The preceding answer is based on the premise that without the verse from there, which is in Hebrew Misham, it would have been assumed that the Kmitza may be performed only in the northern portion of the courtyard. Makes sense. To the analogy between the Mincha and the Ola. All right, we said just like the Ola is Kodesh Kodeshim and can only be done in the northern part of the Azara, so too with the Mincha. All right. The Gemara questions whether such analogy could have ever been made. So now the Gemara is saying, I don't even think your question had a leg to stand on. Let's see. Ma'aliyola shekain kalil. What comparison can be made to an Allah which is completely burned on the altar? Remember, the reason Ola has its name Ola, which means goes up, because they burned the entire sacrifice. It goes all the way up to Hashem. There's no parts left over to eat. Right?
Hashem is everywhere.
A mincha, by contrast, is
Good choice.
a mincha, by contrast, is eating. Yet when we're talking about all these cake type sacrifices, let's call them sacrifices, whether it's flatbread sacrifice, showbread sacrifice, high bread sacrifice, these are all meant to be eaten. Okay, so it's certainly different from an ola. So that's why it's questioning here. What you're bringing me a comparison from an ola, all right, they're two different things. One, there's nothing left in the end, and one, you still have a mincha. She says this an analogy is thus refuted, and so the term from there is not needed for anything to exclude the sanctuary. Concerning that the Ola could not be the source for the assumption that the Kmitza must be performed in the north, the Gemara suggests a different source. Mechatzas, machtzas. It could be derived from the chatas, which also belongs to the category of Kodesh Kodashim and must be slaughtered in the north, but is not totally burnt on the altar. All right, so machzas, I think this is talking about the Kohen Gadol's mincha that he would bring twice a day. I think so. If not, we'll find a way. But the chatas and mincha Kodesh Kodashim could be off that the chatas was slaughtered. So the kamitz of a mincha should be done there. Okay, so the commentary said, because both the chatas and the mincha are Kodesh Kodashim, which is how we started, you can argue that the chatas must be slaughtered in the northern part of the courtyard, just as the chatas can be slaughtered, so the kamitza has to be slaughtered. Oh, before we were talking about Ola, now we're talking about chatas, which is another korban that can only be done in the northern part. All right, but that doesn't go totally up. There is part that's left over to eat. Maybe we can learn from there. The Gemara, however, objects to this source as well. I don't understand why the Gemara brings these questions if it's going to reject them anyway, but I guess it wants to sharpen our learning, right? Ma'alachatas, shekei mechaperes al chayave creases, I think. What comparison could be made to a chatas which atones for chorus bearing sins? Remember, chata, when does someone bring a chatas? If they did a sin, that the punishment requires chorus. So for that, they bring a chatas. If they've done tshuva. This is a stringency that the mincha does not share. I hope you can hear me. This is the best I can do with my voice, right? The Gemara suggests yet another source for the assumption that kamitza must be done in the north. Me'asham. So it's like, well, we struck out on Ola, we struck out on Chatas. Now let's go to Asham, another sacrifice that's done in the north, and try and bring the proof now for Misham, means from the north, for the Kamitza, this part, from Asham. So it's Asham, it could be derived from the Asham, which also belongs to the category of Kodesh Kodashim and must be slaughtered in the north, but it's not completely burned on the altar, nor does it atone for the Kare-sparing sins, meaning it's not an Ola, it's not a Chatas, it's its own variety. Gemara rejects this source as well. Once again, so why did you bring it? I don't know. Ma'ala Asham Shekei. What?
Didn't have Netflix back then. Did nothing.
Okay. Ma'ala Asham, I don't understand your answers. They make no sense. Okay. Ma'ala Asham Shekain Mine Damin. Comparison. Maybe it's because of the medicine I'm on, or maybe it's because they just make no sense. Okay.
That's the purpose.
I'm getting even with you. Mala asham shekei mine damim. What comparison can be made to an asham, which is one of the various type of blood offerings, hence cannot be compared to a mincha, because a mincha is not a blood offering. All right? And we're talking about blood offering in the sense that, remember, with all these sacrifices, they would take the blood and they'd have to fill it in the the cone shaped or vessel, and then the Kohen would walk, and then he'd do his spritzing, and even with the malika on the bird, he'd spritz it and he would squish it. I mean, yeah, but there was blood involved. There's no blood involved in the bread. The bread is parav. So what are you talking about? It's not a flesh bread. The Gemara adds that even all common characteristics of these previously mentioned offerings, the ola, the chatas, the asham, does not suffice to show that the kamitza must be done in the north. So I can't bring it from there. Mikol honami shekei mine damin. In fact, what can be derived even from all of them, which are types of blood offerings, whereas a mincha is not a blood offering. If anything, you've excluded the mincha from them. At this point, the Gemara has shown that there's no basis for assuming that the kamitza must be done in the northern section of the Azara. Hence, the difficulty still remains. What is the purpose of the word from there? And this is still the diehard who want to say from there means the Azara, as opposed to the other opinion that will say from there means from the bowl. If not to teach that the kamitza may be performed only in the courtyard and not in the sanctuary. So it doesn't have an answer yet. The Gemara answers by suggesting a different reason why this verse is needed. Ella itzrich. No, we need it for another reason. Sal kedata chamina. Famous saying. You might have thought, it might have come into your thought process to think, Hoil ksiv, because it's written, V'hikriva el hakohen, V'higisha el mizbeach v'kamatz, that this mincha, he has to bring the mincha to the Kohen. And what does the Kohen do with the mincha? He then does his halicha, whatever. He walks to the mizbeach and he touches it or waves it, whatever, onto the southwest corner of the mizbeach. All right, and there he does his kamitza. He takes the part out, and then he then throws it up on the fire. We can compare the bringing of the mincha to the kamitza of a mincha. Right. We can compare the bringing of a mincha to the kamitza of a mincha. So that's a tough one. He wants to say that the bringing, the hagasha itself, that part can be very considered similar to the kamitza. I don't know, they're two different parts. I'm not understanding why he's saying the Beletzi. This comparison would teach that the Hagosha Bekeren Dromis Maravis, just as the bringing of the Mincha has to be to the southwestern corner of the altar, Av Kamitza Nami Bekeren Dromis Maravis. So too, that is the location that you have to do the Kamitza. So you've got an airplane ticket. The ticket says Southwest Airlines, all right? Your Mincha ticket is also Southwest Airlines. Even though you're all by these American and whatever and other airlines, Delta, etc., or JetBlue, guess what? That ticket doesn't fly there. You've got to go to Southwest because it's the southwest corner where the halacha and the hagasha is done by the Kohen. And from now we're learning, or this proof wants to say the kamitza should be done there. And that's why he gave you this ticket. Now, the Gemara examines another ruling quoted above. Gufa. Once again, this word goof, boy, I love how many times goof has come up. The text itself stated, I'm a Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Shlamim sheshachatan behechal ksherin. Shlamim, which were slaughtered in the sanctuary. We haven't mentioned shlamim yet, have we? No, we mentioned Asham, Chatas, and Ola. Right. So now we're picking the fourth one, Shlamim. Shneimar v'shachatu Pesach Oha Moed, because the pasuk says, that's very good. That's the first time you gave a right answer. All right, because it's stated in regard to Shlamim, he will slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of the meeting. V'lo yeh tafel chamor min ha'ikar. And we can reason that the secondary, the courtyard, should not be more consequential than the primary. It's like a havamina. If he can sanctify it in the opposite, the heichal in the azara, which is less holy than the heichal, certainly he should be able to sacrifice it in the heichal. Might not be the place to do it, but he should be able to do it. That is, since a shlamim may be slaughtered in the courtyard, it may certainly be slaughtered in the sanctuary. So I just said in Hebrew, or half Hebrew. The Gemara challenges Rav Yochanan's reasoning. Meisvei, they challenged it once again from the Brisa, from the lone Mishnah that never found the Gemara to it. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, Minayin shimikifu of the kochavim es hazara. Oh, this was a terrible episode, he says, from when it was known that idolaters came in and they surrounded the courtyard. They were laying siege to the Beis Hamikdash, and they were surrounding the Azara, and they were sending missiles into it. Wow. I don't know what that was, spears or catapults. I mean, maybe like catapults, you know? One moment.
The book with the arrows. They used to put fire on
whatever it was, some sort of what we call the missiles that they would send from Gaza. What was the name of those? The missiles that in Gaza they used to send to Israel. They didn't care where it landed, this and that. You know, when I visited,
I don't watch the news.
The news, this is what's happening in Israel. But you go to Israel. You go to Israel, but you don't watch the news about Israel. So when I was in Israel a month or two ago, and I spent Shabbos in
Jerusalem, sorry.
What was that other place?
Not that
Down south. Shh.
Shiloh.
Stop. I can't think of the name.
Reverend Tati, please help.
The place that I visited, this family lived.
Cedro.
I told you, stay right, thank you. They were 0.6 miles from Gaza. And over there, before we pushed back the border, when the missiles would come and the sirens would go, they instead of a siren, they had announcements, like code reds, because the sirens were scaring the children. They had like less than 4 seconds to get into a shelter. In fact, in the playground, they had these shelters everywhere. I thought they were bathrooms. They were like painted buildings, but they had like every 25 feet, every 50 feet, another shelter because they had just seconds for the kids. It was horrible. So here in the Beis Hamikdash, they were surrounded. Missiles were being thrown into the Azara. And where were the Kohanim supposed to go? It says the Kohanim, when in Nichnasim Lahechal, they would go into the sanctuary, which had a 200-foot wall in the front, right? Maybe that's why the missile didn't go there. For Ochlin, Kodshei Kedoshim, Shirei Menachos. And they'd sit there and they'd eat the parts that they were allowed to eat that came from the what you call it, from these korbanos, and they would eat the menachos that they were allowed to eat, just like the showbreads. So you might say, what's going on here? The Beis Hamikdash is being attacked, and the Kohanim are going in to Fabring in the Heichal. It's like almost doesn't. It's hard to fathom this, but you got to remember, for the Kohanim, this was their Ika mitzvah. The Kohanim were supposed to be eating this. For the Kohanim not to eat, I'm losing my voice, not to eat these parts of the Kabbanas or the Menachos was like, well, why are you doing it at all? It's the finished product. So they weren't breaking in there. They were saying, Hashem, we're doing what you want. Can you stop the missiles already? You know?
We're getting their brachas in.
Okay. Talmud Lomar. So we learn the Torah, therefore, teaches us regarding Kodesh Kodashim. Sorry, it's taking me so long with my voice. I've already prepared 9 and 10, but I can't go this fast. The Kodesh Kadoshim Tochlenu. There's a pasuk in Bamidbar that says the Kodesh Kadoshim Tochlenu, that you can eat the most holy, Kodesh Kadoshim, the holy of holies. The verse teaches, therefore, that sacred food does not become disqualified upon being taken into the sanctuary. The Gemara explains how this brisa contradicts Rav Yochanan. But according to Rav Yochanan, why do I need this verse in the most holy to teach sacrificial foods to not become disqualified? Right. He felt it should be okay. So why does he even need the pasuk? Lema, let us say that this law is derived from the scriptures follows. B'chatzar ohoimoed yachluhu. The verse in the tent of the courtyard, in the courtyard, the azara of the tent of the meeting, they shall eat it. That teaches that sacrificial food is normally eaten in the azara, in the courtyard. And since the secondary shouldn't be more consequential than the primary, meaning that since that shouldn't be more important than the heichal, that since sacrificial food does not become disqualified in the courtyard, it certainly should not become disqualified in the sanctuary. Thus, if Rav Yochanan's logic is applied, the Bryce's derivation is in the most holy is unnecessary because the same conclusion could be reached without it. Naftali, can you still hear my voice?
Yes, I can. I
Okay.
hear you well.
Thank you.
I can't hear your voice.
It's because you're verstopped in
No, 'cause I have my AirPods on.
The Gemara, why are you having this on? The Gemara concedes and Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning suffices to prove that sacrificial food does not become disqualified upon being brought into sanctuary. However, the Bryce's verse in the most holy is still needed, because it teaches that one may eat food here. Because you can't derive that allowance from Rabbi Yochanan's logic because of the following consideration. Avoda, Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning applies to the avoda, to shlomim, to the slaughtering of shlomim, which is a type of service. Okay? The Adam Oved Bimkom Rabo, which is something that a person would do in the presence of his master. And therefore we say that the secondary should not be more consequential than the primary. That is, if a service can be done in the courtyard, which is not so close to the master's presence, it can certainly be done in the sanctuary, which is closer to his master's presence. Hang on, I'll explain this. Achila, but in regard to eating, the logic has no validity. Shein adam ochel b'mkom rabo. Okay, so what he's saying, the previous answer that they could eat in Kodesh Kodashim, you can't apply by logic. You would need to have a pasuk, because normally you don't come in with your sandwich, sit down in front of your Rav, or sit down in front of Hashem and fresh your sandwich. It's not. Enochlin v'ein shosim b'beisei kanish, that says in the Gemara. You don't normally eat and drink in Beis Knesses. Right, so no, how is it that we do it? Because we make the base Knesset, base Medrash, and you keep the base Medrash because you learn it. But you don't do that. You wouldn't walk up to Rabbi Marlowe because you have a shaila with your lunch sandwich and say, Rabbi, I have a shaila. And you open up this triple decker deli sandwich and eat it. Blah, blah, blah. This is my question. I don't know. I mean, there would be such gaiva. You wouldn't do, the Kohanim wouldn't do that in the Kashkashim. So that's why they needed the pasuk. Taima, the kasav kra, hence the only reason we know that when they eat sacrificial food, excuse me, in the sanctuary, is that the verse in the most holy Kodesh Kodashim wrote that one may do so. Halo kasav kra, but had the verse not written this, lo yetafel chamor mina ika lo amrinan. And we would not have said that, like a priori, you can eat certainly there because you can eat in the not as holy area as we used previously. All right. Just want you to know, I don't know if anyone's counting how often I'm coughing, but I'm sure it's more than once a minute. And last night I hardly slept because I couldn't stop counting. And I kept on looking at my clock. And I kept on really coughing hard, or
We told you you're allergic to your dog. Get rid of it.
I'm not allergic to my dog. Okay. You want the medical reason why I'm coughing? No, or you just want to scream
Green
it.
is taking notes of your
The reason I'm coughing is some people, which happens to be myself, after a viral infection, after a virus, Vuden, this kipnish von mitzvahs, after a virus, all right, they get like a asthmatic, like there's all this mucus in the lungs, and that instead of wheezing, they cough. And that's what it is. And until it goes away, you have to listen to me.
You're allergic to
Or
your dog.
you can do me a favor and prepare tomorrow's daf, all right? And then I'll listen and try. I'll listen from home, and you won't hear any coughing. Look where he coming. I wish you gotta see this. Look what he did. Look what he's doing. He's hiding in shame. Oh my God. Talk about bread of shame. Okay. This is falling apart here. All right. Weiter. Continuing. The Gemara presents another dispute about the mincha offering. Itmar stated, "Belula chutz lachamas hazara." If one mixes it, remember flour is usually mixed with oil. They take the flour, they bring it, they put it in a sanctified vessel. First, sometimes they have to put in oil, not always, but usually. Then they put in the flour, then they put in oil. Then now they have dough. They mix it all up, and that's how it's made. And then the kamitza is done. So chutz l'chomas hazara. If one mixed it, the flour of the mincha oil, outside of the courtyard, Rav Yochanan says it's psula. He says that's invalid. Reish Lakish says it's valid. Okay? So now we have this machlokes. The Gemara gives the source of Reish Lakish's opinion. Why does Reish Lakish says that mixing the dough outside of the azara, outside of the courtyard, it's still okay? Because he brings a patzuk. V'yatzak aleh hashamin v'nasan aleh lavona. He shall pour upon it oil and place upon it lavona, v'hada, and afterwards v'hevia al b'nei Aaron haKohen. Then he'll bring it to the sons of Aaron the Kohanim, and the Kohen will take the kamatz. So it's if he's bringing it to the Kohanim, and the Kohanim are typically in the Azara, but where did he bring it from? So it's logical to say maybe he bought it from outside. It doesn't say necessarily he had to have done everything in the inside, because if you did it right in front of the Kohanim, why was he bringing it? That's the initial reasoning. By mentioning the Kohanim only in connection with the Kmitza, and now with the previous pouring, putting it in, pouring the oil, making the dough, Mikmitza v'elaf mitzvah kona. So we're learning that only from the point of the kamitza, of grabbing of the 3 fingers worth of the dough, from that point onward is the mitzvah of the priest. That's the commandment put on the Kohanim. The services must be carried on by the Kohanim. Li made ayitzik or velila, and therefore we could say that the pouring before and the mixing of the oil and the kneading of the dough, the sherin bizarre, they're valid even when it's not done, when it's done by a non-Kohen, right? And since the mixing doesn't need the kuna, pnim nami lobaya, it shouldn't need to have to be done in the courtyard, because we don't live in the courtyard. So it seems logical that we could prepare the dough at home and then bring it into the courtyard where the Kohanim are, where they can only do the kamitza. And from that point on, that's where the milcha becomes kosher in a way. All right? It's like take your shower at home before you go to the mikveh, and then when you go to the mikveh, after the mikveh, kosher. Okay, Rav, doesn't mean you can't do the shower, take the shower in the mikveh, plenty of showers. The source of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula, but Rabbi Yochanan said, no, I'm sorry about this cough. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula, Rabbi Yochanan said that is invalid, given that Asiya Bechlihu, for since its mixing is done in the service vessel, need chuna lo baya. Although it does not need kahuna, pnimi habaya, it does need to at least be performed in the courtyard. So his reasoning is, since you're using a clay shuris, a sanctified vessel, that's where it's done, all right? Well, where are the sanctified vessels? They're not in your home. They're in the Beis HaMikdash. So they're in the Azara. So if that's where it needs that vessel, therefore you got to do it in the Azara. That's his reasoning. The Gemara cites support for Rabbi Yochanan. So let's see the support. Tanya Kavase to Rabbi Yochanan. It was torn in the Brisa, so we're bringing again a lone Mishnah, right? Shelf, no Gemara, in accordance with Rav Yochanan, that will support this Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Klala, blala zek shera, a non-Kohen mixed the mincha, it's valid. All right, so kneading the dough is valid. Now, the rest is sentence. Chutz l'chomas hazara psula. But if it was mixed outside the wall of the courtyard, it is invalid. So they're basically separating in that brisa, saying, yeah, you don't have to be a Kohen to knead the dough, but you can't knead the dough outside of the Azara. It still has to be done in the Azara. The Gemara records another dispute. Okay, fine. The Gemara records another dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about the mincha offering. All right, let's see what this one's about. What? Is that why you argue with me all the time? You don't have to be my chaver. Itma, it was stated, mincha shechasra kodem kmitza. If a mincha became deficient before it underwent kmitza, meaning what if the mincha all of a sudden was missing some dough before the Kohen did the kmitza part? All right? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yavi B'tach Beiso V'Malena. So Rabbi Yochanan says, go home, bring extra dough, throw it in to fill up the bowl, for the amount that's missing. Wind came, it blew away some of the dough, and you need to have a full level service bowl before the Kohen does the kamitza. But if it was deficient, he says, go home, fill it up, and then do it. Says Reish Lakish, who disagrees, Amar, lo yavi mitach peis milena. He says he can't go home and bring it from his house to replenish it. So what's Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning? Rabbi Yochanan, Amar, maybe mitach peis milena. Why did he say he can go home and get the rest of the dough? Mitzah kavele, because he says the kamitza, the point of putting the hand in, when that is done, that's the point where the mincha actually becomes a mincha. It's like that's the bar mitzvah, all right? That before then it wasn't bar mitzvah. It wasn't a mincha, all right? So without the kamitza, it's not a mincha. There's only the kamitza gives a full status of a mincha when it can be, at which point then it could be rendered invalid because it's depleted. But in our case, because Kmitza wasn't done yet, you can't invalidate it because you can still replace the missing flour. Verstehst? You understand? You understand? Reish Lakish's reasoning, Reish Lakish Amar lo yabe mitach beisovi melena, but Reish Lakish said, no, you can't do that. Kedusha's kli kavalei, because he said, wait a minute, the vessel itself, this is a sacred vessel. That itself sanctified the mincha. So as soon as the flour is put into the sacred vessel, it becomes a full-fledged mincha, which can then become disqualified through depletion. So you get the chap. One says it's at the point of the kamitza. And after that, that's when it's valid. And that's when being depleted makes the difference. The other says you don't have to wait to this. Before even this, the fact that you started with a full vessel, that the vessel itself sanctified it. So if the vessel all of a sudden was short, it doesn't go according to this opinion. Reish Lakish is challenged. Esfei Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan challenged Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish from the Mishnah. This time we're challenging from a Mishnah that discusses the lug of oil used in Mitzvah's purification. Okay, Choseh alok im ad shelo yatzak. If the lug of oil became deficient before the coin poured it into the hand of the second coin, Imalena, he should replenish it. So we see over there that you can still replenish it before, you've done the whole process. Now, just to remind you what goes on there, obviously we're going to stop shortly, into when the Mitzvah can be made kosher again, so to say, or cured, all right, what happens? He brings a special korban. They take from the blood of the korban, and put in the kli. The Kohen puts the blood on his finger, and it goes on the sides of his finger, I think. Goes somewhere at some special point on his finger, and he touches the Mitzvah's thumb, right big toe, which is the hallux, and I think he touches his head. And then afterwards, he repeats the same process with the oil we're talking about, all right? Same three spots. And then, like they do at championships, then they take the champagne and they dump it. Then they take the oil and they dump it on the head of the Mitzvah. Like, wow, this must have looked really cool, right? So he says, at that point, you can sue your Malena. This is so despite the fact that the oil wasn't a sacred service vessel. So he's saying the oil, if it became deficient in that vessel, you could still fill it up. Why? Because the vessel is sacred. The Brisa thus contradicts Reish Lakish, who holds that the vessel renders its content susceptible to invalidation through deficiency. Because here we prove that it's not invalid from that case. Tiyufta indeed is a refutation of Reish Lakish's view. All right. Now, the Gemara is going to introduce a third dispute, right? So we're up to Itmar, which is about 2/3 of the way down. Amates, I got to go to Davin. I'm sorry I didn't go further.
Thank you very much.
I am prepared to do tests and Yud for tomorrow. However, if anyone, please, has a better voice and would like to volunteer in the morning, I will be very happy to give the kamitza over to you. All right. Have a
How's
great,
everybody?
Your voice
have a
is
great day.
beautiful.
Your voice is beautiful.
Your voice is beautiful.
Yeah, I just
Thank
want
you,
to say,
Rennie.
the only person who likes my voice like this is my wife. She said, I like your voice because I don't
Yes,
have
he's
to.
not have any choice.
I see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.